Hello everyone and welcome back. Today is a special session. It marks the end of track 1 in the Android Study Jams 2020 program. Over the last couple of weeks, we learned quite a bit, both in Kotlin and Android, covering a range of topics from variables to hereditary and starter code to app icons. We're at a stage now where we can develop decent apps, though there's still one other thing we can add to our apps that will really cement the basics of Android app development. So with that in mind, let's get into today's session. Before we start, let's take a quick look at today's schedule. So as you can see right away, this is much less heavier than the previous session. So a bit of relief for all of you. We'll be starting off by taking a look at the recap of all the sessions up till now, sessions 1 to 3. And then we'll start off with the overview for Pathway 6, the Code Lab 1, followed by a small break and an overview for Code Lab 2, another small break, and finally Code Lab 3, finishing off track 1 for the program. Now we'll have a quick recap of the last 3 weeks. In the first session, we started off by looking at basic programming concepts, and then we set up Android Studio and ran our first ever Android app. And in the second session, we eased it a bit more into the program's flow and Kotlin and Android by looking at randomness in programming, incorporating real-world entities into our programs by way of classes and objects, displaying and designing screens, and making decisions. And the last session, we further extended the idea of classes and objects by incorporating hereditary, and we even looked a bit at the UI side of things by creating styles and themes for our app, as well as the app icons. So today's goal is another static app, meaning it's not as interactive as the past two apps that we built. It's similar to the birthday app that we built in the first session in that it doesn't do much, but just like the birthday card app, this helps incorporate a very important concept and common concept that you'll come across almost in any Android app, and we'll see what that is going forward. Today we'll be doing the 6th pathway in Unit 2 of Track 1. So here are some of the main takeaways for today's session. After completing this pathway, you'll be able to store more than one value at once. We'll see why this is useful and how it is possible in Kotlin. And in Android, you'll be able to display information in the form of a list. Again, we'll see how it's useful with respect to Android and how you can achieve that by trying to relate it to Kotlin's lists. You can even we'll include images in our app as well, and we'll play around a bit more with the UI. We'll be doing some of the same things we did last time, just to cement them as a process in our brains, so we become familiar with what we already learned. Right, so let's get started. There are a lot of situations in life where we have to keep track of multiple things, or we find ourselves having to collect multiple items. In other words, we make collections or lists in order to note down a number of items. And collections have their own place in the real world, in the form of grocery lists, food orders, etc. Can anyone think of a couple more? Just if you can, just put them in the chat. Where else do you think we would need this way of keeping track of information by collecting multiple items in one place? All right. One example, like I mentioned, is food orders and even bills. Bills are also a list of items showing what you bought in that particular establishment, and other things as well, like student records, the number of marks, even maybe the collection of CDs you have at home, or even the collection of books you have. So we can see that there are quite a bit of use cases for holding multiple values rather than keeping track of only one at a time. And as you can imagine, this could prove to be very useful while writing programs as well. One of the biggest and most prevalent use cases I can think of is dealing with data sets. When working with huge amount of data, you'll generally receive data in the form of an Excel sheet. And you'll often find yourself needing to work with only 1 or 2 columns at a time. This could be for plotting graphs or even building ML models. And for both these activities, you'll be capturing the information in a column in the form of a list. Bottom line, lists are pretty important in the world of programming as well. And luckily, each programming language offers its own way of collecting multiple values. So far, we've only stored single values in our variables with the data types we've discussed. Can any of you recall a data type that somewhat holds multiple values? We've used it it was very crucial for one of the apps we built in the past 3 sessions. That's a hint. Can any of you recall what that data type is? No. Thank you for trying though. Anyone else want to try? We used it for one session to build an app, and it is a key factor in building the app. So, and it kind of held multiple values. I'll wait for a couple more seconds. Yep, int range, that's correct. Thank you, Sneha. So the reason I said somewhat is because even though we were able to initialize the variable with multiple values, we could only access one at a time. Or at most we could, whenever we called it or try to access the value, it always gave us only one in return. Luckily, Kotlin provides a couple of options to help store multiple values in the form of lists. It offers 2 types of lists, both of which we'll explore in more detail in the code lab. One is mutable lists and one is lists. Some of you may be already trying to differentiate between the both, and I think the name gives it away, but we'll look at them in detail as we move on. Another important aspect of the lists in Kotlin is that only one type of data can be stored in the list, and we'll have to specify what type of variables we want to store when we create the list. So what I mean is, for one list we can store only integers, or we can store only strings, and we can even store objects. So I think we created a dice object, right, in one of the code sessions. So you can even hold a list of dice, which are objects made from that dice class. Another concept just as important and useful as lists are loops. And by general definition, loops are just performing a certain action multiple times. Can anyone give me examples of loops where you would find them in real life? Yeah, I guess if you want to calculate the amount spent in a certain maybe grocery trip, you would loop over the amount of items and calculate for each item. But I'm talking more in the sense in real life. Where do you see loops? Yeah, that's an interesting interpretation. Yeah, our daily routine, we keep doing it every day again and again. That's a good example. A few other example is when you're playing songs and you hit the repeat button. So what happens here is after the song gets over, it's a loop. It keeps on looping. Same thing for videos as well. If you use any media player like VLC or Windows Media Player, you can put the video on loop and it'll keep replaying until you stop it. That's one example of loops. Another very prevalent example of loops are GIFs. They're just a certain part of a video playing again and again. So loops, again, just like lists, are very prevalent in the real world. And they're just like the other things we discussed till now, they're present in the world of programming as well. And with respect to programming, like Prakash suggested, it's executing a piece of code number of times. So for the example he gave, where you would calculate the total amount of sum, maybe you have a list of numbers and you want to calculate the sum of each of them. So you loop over the list and calculate. We'll see how this is done in the code labs. So loops, obviously they end after a while. Like you can't keep executing the same piece of code forever and ever and ever. That would waste time, you get nowhere. So there are certain ways to break out of a loop, and that happens when you execute the loop for a fixed number of times, and after that it stops, or it doesn't retain a condition anymore, and then you stop after that. So there are 2 ways to achieve this in most programming languages. There are 2 types of loops. for loops and while loops. Here I have listed the both types of loops, and I've chosen Java because Kotlin does it in a very shorthand way, and you don't really get to see the full extent of how it's carried out. And I think Java gives you a better intuitive sense of how everything happens. So I've written the same thing in the for loop and while loop, and we'll see the structure of both of them and understand how a loop actually works. So this is the for loop. This is the syntax in Java, and you can break down any loop into three parts: an iterator, a condition, and the code. So an iterator is basically tells you how many times to execute the loop. And in this case, it's I, whatever. I'll explain the code again after explaining the structure. And the next part is the condition, which tells you for how many times to repeat the loop, or when to break out of the loop or when to exit. And finally, you have the code, which is what gets executed each time you execute the loop. So for here, what we're saying is that we're saying you have the iterator I, and it's currently set to 0. And when I is less than 5, that's when you stop. Sorry, when I is greater than 5, you stop. So until and unless I is greater than 5, you keep executing. So if I left it at this part, and this extra part wasn't here, what would happen was I would always have the value 0, and it would always be less than 5. So it keep executing forever and ever and ever, and we don't want that, because if we place any loop like I just described in the middle of a program, it would execute forever and would never reach the later paths. That's where this comes in handy, and this is what increments the value of the letter I. So what would happen is it would print out loop plus along with the number I, so it would be a loop 0, and then it would increase by 1. I++ is a way in Java of incrementing values by 1. So then it would become 1. So it will print out loop 1, and then increase one more, loop 2, and each time it checks the value of I against the conditions we've put here. So it checks 0 is less than 5, okay, execute. 1 is less than 5, execute. 2 is less than 5, execute. And this keeps on going until loop 4. And then so it executes loop 4, and then it increments one more time. It becomes 5. And since 5 is not less than 5, that's where it breaks. Similarly, we have a while loop where the iterator and the iterator you have to initialize outside the for loop, not outside the while loop, not inside as you did for the for loop. And the condition you place inside the while loop. So this is basically the same thing, saying that while the value of I is less than or equal to 5, execute what's inside. And just like the for loop, you can't leave it here, otherwise it will keep executing forever. So you include this incrementing statement in the while loop. Again, you have to do it separately, not like in the for loop where it's done in the statement at the beginning. So that's about loops. Hopefully this gives you some clarity on what they are, and we'll see how they're used in the code lab shortly. So yeah, that's it for code lab 1. This is the concepts we'll be using. All right, let's move on. So this is code lab 1. Right, so this code lab is just to get us introduced to the concept of lists and what all we can do with them. And like I mentioned, there are two types of lists, list and mutable list. And list is basically read-only, meaning, you can't modify it, you can't add to it, you can't remove to it, you can't even change the values that you've put in the list. Whereas mutable lists, all this is possible. You can add, remove, or update elements, and we'll see what happens in each of the cases. So first we'll look at just read-only lists. Right, so now what we've done is a very simple thing. I just created a list of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is the syntax for doing so. So something's missing. I said I mentioned something in the slides right just a few minutes ago about lists and what you have to do with lists, particularly at the time of initialization. But and something's missing. Can anyone tell me what it is? Yeah, data type. And can anyone tell me why it still ran? I think I mentioned this in one of the sessions, maybe under passing, but I think I mentioned it. Can anyone tell me why Kotlin still ran the code successfully without any errors? All right. How many of you remember something called type inference? Type inference is something that Kotlin has, and if the values you set for a variable are not ambiguous, Kotlin can understand what data type you're using. So here, since I've clearly given numbers, Kotlin understands that the list can only hold integers. And if I try something like this, it'll give us an error because I think it's because I haven't mentioned the type yet, but it's better to use only one data type in the list. So here you can see they've explicitly mentioned it. You can do this just to be safe, but even in case you don't, and it's pretty obvious what you're trying to use as a data type, Kotlin can understand that. This goes for normal variables also. So yeah, you can even print the list of numbers, and that's the output you get. So storing elements isn't storing values won't do anything on its own. We should be able to use it. Maybe you want to use it for another operation or look at the list elements in the list later on. We can do that as well by something called accessing elements by index. So very quickly, index can be thought of as the position of the elements in the list. And for most programming languages, the index actually starts from 0. So as you can see here, when you say the first index or the first position, you actually mean the 0th one. So this is how it is. If you have 6 elements, you'll have first element is 0, second element is 1, third element is 2, like that. There are very few cases where the index actually starts from 1. I think one of the cases is MATLAB. But yeah, for the most part, indexes start from 0 for the lists in programming languages. So the way you would access that is you write the list name and square bracket and then the index position you want. So it will give you the, yeah. The reason that didn't work is because I included something extra apart from just the variable name, and I didn't use curly brackets. So it took it as a part of the string. Yeah, so this will give you the value of the value at the position you asked for. So I asked for the 0th position and give me the value present here, which is 1. So if I say 3, which would really mean 4, it will give me 4. And if you try to go out of range or beyond the size of the list, it will throw an error. And this is called array index out of bounds exception, which basically means you try to access a part of the list that doesn't exist. And you can even access the size of the list. Like so you get 4. And there are other operations like first and last, which basically return the first and last elements of the list. Pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, so first gives you first, and similarly last gives you the last element. And you can even check if a particular element exists in the list or not by using the contains method and passing to it the element you're looking for. So if I say 4, it should say true. It will return a Boolean. And if I say something like 9, it should say false because 9 doesn't exist in the list. Like I mentioned, lists are read-only. So if you try to do anything by modifying the existing list, you will get an error. So let's try that. first thing we can try is try to change the value of existing element. So if I try to change this one to 8, which this would mean that 1 should become 8, but since it's yeah, so it basically means that you can't change the or modify the list elements because it's a read-only list. And in a similar fashion, if you try to add to the list, it will give you a same error, not same error, similar error saying that the add method doesn't exist for this particular data structure, which is just a read-only list. So it's saying unresolved reference add, which basically means that for this data structure, this function add doesn't exist. But despite the fact that you can't modify it, you can perform some other operations on it that will give you another list. So if I say reversed. Yep, there you go. One of the possible options that you can do that will create a new list for you is reversed. So basically it'll reverse the list and give you a new list with the elements in reverse, and you can use that. Another method like this is it sorted or sorted? So let me change this because it's already sorted. So it will sort it and give you the sorted list. There you go. And yeah, I've listed a couple of options. You don't have to memorize all of them. When you work in Android Studio, or even if you use existing software's software IDs for Kotlin, as soon as you type the list name and you put a dot, which is how we access these operations, you will get a list of operations and you can auto-complete your code instead of having to remember them. So you don't have to worry about that. Next, we look at mutable lists. The syntax is pretty much almost the same of creating it. Again, it still works because of type inference. Kotlin can clearly understand that I'm using only integers here. And these are two different ways of creating them, two other different ways. Now here, if I do just this and don't put anything inside, Kotlin doesn't have anything to go off of. So it says not information to infer type variable. So basically, since I didn't put anything inside, it can't understand what type I could possibly want to use. And this is the case of unambiguous elements. And since there aren't elements here, Kotlin can't understand what type. So it gives me an error saying you haven't inferred a type. Not to say that you can't initialize an empty list. So in this case, what you would do is you mention the list type. So either you could do it like this, or you could do it like this. And now the error is gone. Since we mentioned that it will be an int, it will understand that we'll be using ints in the future. So it creates the list without any problem. So yeah, now that we've used a mutable list, we can add and remove data from it, and we can even update, which is what we'll do now. So the third one would be 9. Let's change it to 5. You can see then the value in the third position, third index, changed to 5. So we can do that as well. Now here I used 3 different statements to add 3 different elements. And if you have more than 3, it could get really annoying to type it each time. So Kotlin offers a way out with a method called add all, and you pass in a bunch of values and it does the same thing. So yeah, the mistake I made was I didn't give it a list. No. Yeah, there you go. So you can't directly use brackets to indicate a list. You actually have to create a list from the elements you want to add, and then it takes it as a list and adds it to the existing list. And you can create just a readable list to add, because anyway, since the list you're adding to is mutable, it'll have those properties as well. So you can just add a non-mutable list of elements, and you can join them to the existing list instead of adding them individually. So lastly, if I try to add a string to the list of ints, it will throw me an error because it's expecting an integer but got a string. So you cannot do that. You can only have one type of list. And you can even remove items. So yeah, as you can see, 3 was removed. And you can have duplicate values in a list, although there are data structures that allow you to have data types that allow you to have only unique elements, and we won't discuss them for now, but know that lists can have more than this list can have duplicate values as well as unique values. And of course, you can't remove something that isn't there. You can try it, but Kotlin doesn't throw an error. Other languages would, but it wasn't have any effect since 10 didn't exist in the first place. So here they've done nothing but you've done the same thing we've done with strings. Another function like contain is empty, which basically says it tells you if the string is empty, a list is empty or not. And you can remove based on the position instead of just the value. You can use something called remove at, and you pass in the index, and it will remove the value of the particular index. Next thing to do is looping through a list. So we talked about loops, and now we'll see how they're used in Kotlin. Can anyone guess why that didn't run? Don't worry about the error, but can anyone tell me why it didn't run? That's because I forgot to increment the value of I. So what happened was it kept running adding the value, and eventually it ran out of memory. So it threw an error saying out of memory. To fix that, I just have to increment the value of I. Can you tell me why this error popped up? Even the error says it. Yeah, exactly. Value you can't increment, and I'm trying to increment the value of I here, which is basically changing it, and val doesn't allow that, so I have to use var. Thank you, Sneha. Right, so now we can see that the code finally worked, and what it does is simply prints out the iterations of the loop it goes through. So this would be our iterator, and this is the condition, and while this is less than 5, print out this. So it prints the value of 0, increments it to 1, prints the value of 1, increments it to 2, prints the value of 2, increments it 3, prints the value of 3, increments it to 4, prints the value of 4, and all the while it checks the value of I against 5, since that's the condition we put up there. And when it reaches 4, it increments. This will execute because it's still inside the loop when it became 4. So once after this, it will become 5, and since 5 is not less than 5, it will stop the program. This is for the while loop, and this is how it generally works. But let's see how we can loop through a list. Yeah, so I just made it a bit more readable, but that's how you would loop through a list. You would say I equal to 0 because the starting index is 0, and you would say until it's less than guess.size, you print the values at each index, which is I. So I would be your index or position, and you would access the corresponding value in the list with the iteration number. So iteration 0, you would access the 0th element, iteration 1, you'd access the first one, so on and so forth. Okay, again, another question. Can anyone tell me why this isn't equal to? I less than or equal to? Right, yeah. The question was, why can't it be I less than or equal to? And yeah, Prakash is right. If I do that, let's see what happens. Basically means when I get to 4, it will become 5, and it will see 5 is less than or equal to 5. And it tries to access guess of 5, but since that doesn't exist, it throws an error. So always be careful when you're looping through a list. Either you can put, okay, can someone tell me how I can achieve the same thing, the same correct result that it is now, but with an equal sign? Oh, my screen is unshared. Okay, 1 second. Is it visible now? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so like I was saying, how do I modify this code to include the less than equal to, but still make it work? Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Sneha. So if I, like she rightly pointed out, oh, my bad. One minute. Yeah, so if you do that, it should work the same way. Yeah. That's about using for loop, while loop. We'll quickly take a look at for loop. So yeah, with the case of for loop, you don't have to do that prior initialization of the iterator. You can directly write it, and this is the code to write it. So for I, and if you guys remember, this is the same code that we used for the int range. So I can even initialize int range 0 type variable to this range and just say I in that int range variable and do the same thing. And similarly, you don't have to do as much work as you did for while loops to iterate through a list. So it does all it did is I in guests, and that's the for syntax for looping through a list, and it give you the same answer as a while loop bit. But the one disadvantage of using this kind of syntax uh, yeah, sorry about that. The one disadvantage of can you tell me the disadvantage of using this kind of syntax? It's a bit tricky, but think on it for a while, maybe 30 seconds or so. I'll repeat the question. Why can't I why is this, where would this method fail in terms of looping through a list? Right now I can say I in guess and it give me access to the elements of the list. Where would this fail? No, that goes into time complexities and all that. I'm not looking that far. It's a very simple thing. I'll repeat my question again. With this sort of syntax for I in the list name, I can access the elements of the loop, list. Where would this fail? Not fail, but where would it be disadvantageous or? Yeah, exactly. I can't access the indices. Exactly. Thank you, Prakash. So to do that, can anyone guess the syntax? In case anybody will understand, this directly gives me the access to the elements. I can't tell which index I'm on. So maybe I might need the index for certain cases, and that wouldn't work. Can someone try to guess the syntax for this? I've shown both the parts in pieces, so maybe someone can piece it together. That's one way. That's the Python way. I don't know if that same thing exists. Yeah, exactly. Um, yes, Neha. So can you give me the direct syntax or you can try, it's fine. The concept is correct. That's the right answer. But can you give me the exact syntax? Because there's a bit of a catch there too. Uh, Not exactly, but this is the syntax. Okay, now that you've seen this, do you think it'll work? Right, yeah. Do you, sorry, do you guys think this will work if I press enter? Ah, yep, correct. So normally for int range, it's inclusive of the last number you put. For certain languages, this is in the case like Python. If you use the same range variable in Python, it will exclude the last number, but for Kotlin, it includes it. And if I kept it to only guess.size, it would give the same error that we looked at for the while case. So now if I do this, it will run correctly and it will give me the, yeah, see, it gave me the just the indices. And if I wanted to access them, the elements, I would have to do the same thing as I did before, which is this. So there are certain other variations. One of them is down to, which is basically countdown. It's going backward. And there's one more thing called step. So if I do for I, what this will do, it will skip over. The step basically means the value to skip. So if I say 2, it will skip, it will print every other element. If I say step 3, it will skip 3, 3. It will go in groups of 3. So it will print 0, 3, 6, and then 9, and stop. So that's another way of looping. And that's it for this code lab. Just a quick question. How do you keep track of all the things you want to do for the day? Do you guys use a notes app or any to-do list app? Something like that? Ah, cool. Good to know. And where do all the photos get saved on your phone? Right, yeah. And lastly, how many alarms do you set? Is it less than 5 or more than 5? Yeah, okay. So now these questions may seem very unrelated or random. Right, yeah. These three questions and their answers might seem very random. Gallery, alarm app, and notes app, to list app. But turns out they have more in common than you would think. So we saw how lists were used and we talked about its importance just a few minutes back, and we saw how they're implemented and used in Kotlin. Turns out lists are used in apps as well, and it's one of the most common UI components you use while developing Android apps. Some of the, if you think about all the answers we just gave, there are lists. To-do lists basically are a notes app. To-do list shows all the items you have to do. That's in the name itself, to-do list. And even a gallery is a list of all the photos, although it's in a different manner. It's the photos are shown in a different manner. They're not shown one below the other. They're shown one next to each other. And even if you take a look at the Notes app, it also shows you the list of notes you've written in the similar way that the gallery shows you side by side. And finally, the alarm app, it shows you the list of alarms you have as well, one beneath the other. Others are the WhatsApp chat lists you have, or even the call logs you have, or the contacts. So you can think of a lot of places where lists are used in Android. And today we'll be learning how to implement them with something called the recycler view. So up till now, we've learned of views like buttons, switches, radio buttons, radio groups, text views, image views, edit text views, so on and so forth. And today and recycler view is just another view like that. So like I mentioned, the gallery is shown like this. So it's shown side by side, but it's also a list. And the alarm clock app also shows a list of the alarms you have. And the recycler view is a very interesting topic. If you don't understand it properly, then it will be very difficult going forward. And I had a really hard time learning it when I started out. It confused me for a lot of time. But when I understood it, it made so much sense. So, and I think a lot of people face this issue that they don't understand the recycler view properly, but they ignore it since it's a very standard procedure. So they don't bother to learn much about it. But when you want to build more complex apps, you'll have to interact with it a bit more. And for that, you need proper knowledge. So hopefully the couple of slides that I'm going to show you soon give you enough clarity, and hopefully the app we build soon gives you more clarity on how the recycler view works. So I'll try to explain as much as I can in this slide about the recycler view, and as I go forward, I'll give you more clarity. So let me try to do it with the example of the alarm clock app. So in Kotlin, in the list we created, we had elements, right? So each list had a bunch of elements. Similarly, in this alarm clock app, you can think of each of the timings or each of the alarms you set as one element. So totally there would be 3 elements in this particular case. And what the recycler view does is it creates these things called view holders. And as the name suggests, they are containers that hold the views. And in the view holders, you would create the layout for each item to display. As you can see, for each item here, there are a couple of common things: the time, whether it's switched on or not, and the days it should ring. So that would be the layout. You could design this very simple layout in XML, and you would use this layout for each element. And each element you would provide the data to show. Like here, they have the same layout, but they have different values. So you provide them for the view holder, and the view holder would display them on screen. One of the selling points for recycler view, or why it's so commonly used, is because of the efficiency it exhibits when displaying lists. So let's say you have 10 alarms, and obviously 10 alarms won't fit on the screen. And I'll show you this later on in when we build the affirmations app, but try to imagine it for now. So if you have 10 alarms, 10 alarms won't fit on the screen. From estimation, maybe another alarm would fit. So what Recycler View does is, instead of creating 10 different view holders for each of the 10 alarms, it creates just 4. That is as many that can fit on the screen. And when you scroll and the new alarms come into view or come into visibility, Recycler View uses those view holders. Again, it reuses them for the upcoming list. So instead of creating each and every time, it will reuse the ones it already has to display the new data. So in that sense, it's very efficient and it saves you a lot of time. So that's one of the most talked about points for Recycler View. Anyone has any doubts so far? If you do, please ask. This is a very important topic and I don't want any of you to be confused about this. So it's fine, even if it's a small doubt, I'll answer it. Or if you want me to go over the slide again, I'll do that as well. Any of these things you want, you can mention and I will do correspondingly. Even if it's one person, it's fine. I'll wait for a couple of seconds. All right, let's move forward then. So let's look closely. Let's take a closer look at a Recycler View and its paths. So like I mentioned, the whole thing is a Recycler View. Like for the apps we built now, everything in the layout came under the constraint layout. So the whole thing was wrapped in a constraint layout. In some cases, it will be wrapped in a linear layout as well. In a similar fashion, everything in a screen that has a list, like the call log or the gallery or the alarms, all the screens are wrapped in a Recycler View view. So you can think of it as Recycler View being the parent of the screen, and all the things that come under it are the children. So this whole thing is the Recycler View, and each element in the screen is a view holder. Now, I'll explain a bit more and hopefully get a clarity, but understand one thing. This image and this text do not make up the view holder. Those two are views, they're layouts. What's beneath it is the view holder. You can think of it as a view holder as a blank space that reserves some space for one element. And on top of that space, you're drawing in the details for the layout. So you have a view holder, it's a blank card you can imagine. And on that card, you draw the layout first, the sketch. On top of that, you add the more details like the image and the text. So each item has the same layout, as you can see, and that's the case that's how Recycler Views are built. You have one layout that gets used for each item, and for each item you provide the corresponding data. So in this case, the layout for each item would be the image and the text. So each item here has an image and a text. So for every view holder you create, you would make a layout saying image and text. And for each item, you would populate the image field and the text field. And at the end, you will display each item as a list. So that's how it works. So here, it will only create 3 view holders since only 3 are visible. And as you scroll up, it will keep those view holders in place, and it will just change the information that appears on it. So the image and the text, only those two will change. Only those 2 properties will change, but the view holders will stay in place. Right, now let's see how to implement a Recycler View. So you create a layout for each item first, and it's used for each item in the list. It will be referenced later on to fill the layout with the views and provide the data for a corresponding item. And then you add a Recycler View to the activity. So you drag and drop a Recycler View item in the activities layout, and you create what's known as an adapter. Now, an adapter is it's a class, you can say, that transforms the data to display in a list. So if I go back here, obviously in Android Studio, you can't store the views separately in a list. What you would store is 7:15, 8:30. So those 3 items would be in a list. and you'd have to transform them into the UI you see here. So that's what the adapter helps in doing. It creates a view for each item and provides the data for each item. It creates the view holders as well. And this adapter, all this is done only when requested by the recycler view. So let's say you open up the app, and in our case, the affirmation is the only screen in the app. So when you open it up, recycler view understands you open the app up and calls the adapter to say, hey, for this screen, I can only fit 3. So please create 3 view holders. And as and when I want you to, provide the view and the data details for the corresponding item. And when you scroll up, it says, don't create new view holders, reuse the ones, but just change the data. So all this is a communication between the recycle view and the adapter. And we only call the adapter once explicitly. All these things about creating or reusing view holders, creating them for the first time is done implicitly. We don't have to see it and we don't have to worry about it. We just need to know how it works. So in case we need to change something, we understand what to change and where. Let's take a look at the adapter next. What you give to the adapter is what's known as the activity context, which basically contains the details about the layout of the screen you're showing the list in. So it will just be a recycler view and the list of items to be shown. So for us, it will be the list of affirmations, and we'll see how this plays out in the code lab. So what the adapter does is it creates a view holder, which basically you pass a view to it, a particular view, and from that view, it references the UI components in the layout. So it takes the layout and the view. You'll understand clearly, but in the code lab, but for now, just understand that it references the UI components. So we bind the UI components to variables. That's what we've done up till now, right? So similarly, it'll create a variable for image and bind it through its ID and do the same thing for text. So that's what the view holder does. And it has 2 parts, on create view holder and on bind view holder. The on create view holder inflates the view with the layout and returns the view holder with the filled in view or layout. And on bind view holder provides the data for the specific item. So for this is the image and this is the text. And for this one, this affirmation, this is the image and this is the text. So all this for which item, which text and image should appear, this is all taken care of by the bind view holder. And finally, it displays a list on the app. So again, it's a pretty complex, I understand. So just to quickly summarize in a very simple way, simplistic view. So hopefully this will let you understand the deeper concept behind it. You need to display lists. You can do that with the recycler view. And each item in the list is one view. And each view is contained in a view holder. The view holder needs the layout of the view and the data to display. And all this is created on the recycler view's request. The on create view holder just provides the layout, and the on bind view holder just provides the data. So everyone with me so far? Any doubts? All right, I'll move on then. So that's it for CodeLab 2. Now we'll construct the first part of the app, and this CodeLab will really give you the meaning and let you understand how the recycler view works. So let's move on to that. All right, so we'll be using material again at the third code lab to add the UI and stuff. I don't think it's anything new. It's mostly the stuff we've done before, just to familiarize ourselves with the new aspects we got introduced in the last session. But like I mentioned, if you have the latest version of Android, it'll automatically import it for you. So yeah, as you can see, I already have material and app compat. Right, so let's get into the actual app. Again, I'll be just copy pasting any big piece of code and explaining what they mean later on. So what I've done here is basically I've opened up the strings XML file in the resource folder and just copy pasted the affirmations we'll be using. So what this does is I can access these affirmations by their names instead of typing out the affirmations each time. This is basically the Kotlin equivalent of initializing a variable and giving it a value. We're just doing it with XML. So that's what that is. And yeah, like I mentioned, we can access them by this syntax. So R, again, if just as a refresher, R is a class of all the resources you have in your Android project. So you can access, it has subclasses. So R is the main class, string is one subclass, drawable is one subclass, ID is one subclass, color is another subclass, and each of them have your own objects, you can say. So for the string subclass, affirmation 1 is an object, affirmation 2 is an object, affirmation 3 is an object, and this is the value for a particular object. And it follows the same convention of accessing properties by dots. So that's what this is. Now we'll be taking a look at something on packages. Packages are basically help you separate your code into different parts so you can easily understand it. They don't do much more than that. It's just to help you organize your code so that when other developers understand it or read it, they immediately understand what you're trying to do here instead of having to bang their head over it. So by default, we already have three packages that we are given when we create a startup project in Android. They're just your company name followed by the app name, and the last two are for testings, and we won't worry about them for now. So what I've done till now is I've basically made a package under the affirmations package called model. Don't worry about why this is I'm doing it or naming the packages the way I am. It's a convention used in programming. So basically the model, I'm basically creating the affirmation object, and this is easier to maintain, like I mentioned. So affirmation will be a class. Right, so what I've done now is I've created a class called affirmations, and we pass in the resource ID, the string resource ID, which is these values here. And though they look like strings, Kotlin treats them as integers, so which is why I've put the parameter as type int. And we'll see why we need this later on, but for now, we'll keep it like this. And you might be wondering what this data keyword is at the beginning. It's a different type of class in Kotlin. It has certain special properties that make it easier to deal with. We'll see what they are as and when they pop up. But for now, just know that it's a special type of class. For people who work with Java, you might realize that if you have any private variables in your class, you'll have to set getters and setters by yourself. Well, Kotlin does that for you with the data class. So uh, if you declare any class as a data class, you don't have to write the getters and setters. It will be inbuilt for you, and you can directly access those methods. So that's the difference for people who know Java. For the people who aren't familiar, don't worry, we'll discuss them when they come up. So let's make another package now. So this is nothing. I've created another package called data. This is basically where the data source comes from, and this is what we'll be displaying in our list. So every time you need to display a list and you want to use the recycler view, this is the forward convention. You have a model class, which we'll see what the use of it is later on. But the data, then you create data package, which contains the data you're displaying in your list. So we created a function called load affirmations, and it returns a list of affirmations. And we're using the list of method, not mutable list, because it's a fixed list. Will only be displaying 10 affirmations in our app. And we created objects of the affirmation class by passing in the string affirmations. So that's what we've done till now. And just to make sure that everything is working, we can try to display the list of the size of our list in the main activity. You don't have to do this, but just to make sure things are working. There seems to be a problem. Not a matter. That wasn't much. This is what the output would look like. We're just displaying the list of the size of the list. The next is actually adding a recycler view. So I pointed out all the main points. When you do it yourself, you can go through the CodeLab documentation again properly. So we'll be using something called a frame layout to display add the recycle view in it. And we'll be dragging in a recycler view. So this is what it looks like. You can see that it has a list of items, and this is what will be populating with. So for each item, we'll be populating the required data, and it will show it in the way we want, which is why we're designing a separate layout for it as well. So this is what I was talking about when I talked about the Note app and the Gallery app, and the difference with the call log app or the WhatsApp app. The WhatsApp. In WhatsApp and call logs, the items are displayed one beneath the other, and in Gallery and Notes, they display next to each other. And this is what determines that. So if you use a linear layout manager, it will display one below the other. If you use a grid layout manager, it will display next to each other. So that's what. And that's comes from property called layout manager. That's that. So we created the layout for the recycler view now. The screen will be showing the list. Now let's create the adapter. So to create the adapter, the first thing I mentioned was before that we need to create the layout for the items. Let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing mention that we need is the right. So for now, we'll just be looking with the text. We won't add the images yet. That's been the next CodeLab. And now we'll be creating the actual adapter. So following with the theme of making things or keeping things organized, I'll create another package called adapter. So I created a class called item adapter, which is where will be this is where everything happens. All the on the binding to the view and creating the view holders. This is where all that stuff happens, and we'll see how it goes. So the first thing to do is create a class, and we'll be passing in the list. So like I mentioned, one of the things the adapter needs is the list of data to pass. So we'll be passing in that, and we'll be calling this from the main method with the list of items to pass. And we'll also be needing the context, which is what gives us the information about the screen. Will be displaying all the items. So I'll add that as a parameter as well. And now we'll create the item view, the view holder.
Hey, Sahil, sorry to interrupt. I don't really think your screen is shared.
Oh, thanks. 1 second. Can you see it now? Can everybody see it now? Yeah, okay. So like I was saying, we created the item adapter class. We created a new package, and we're creating the item view holder, which is what we use to create the container for each item, and we'll be following that up with the on bind view and on create view holder as well. So like I mentioned in the slides, we'll be passing in the view which will be contained within this item view holder. And yeah, it's a subclass. This is a subclass of the abstract class view holder, which is again a subclass of recycler view. And we're passing in the view same view we're passing in here. Now this is what I meant by view holder referencing the layout components in our layout. So currently the only thing we have is a text view. So it's referencing that in the view holder, and through the methods created as part of the view holder class, we'll see that it passes in the layout and the data as well. So now we're extending the item adapter as a subclass of the adapter class, and we're passing in, and we're saying that this is the corresponding view holder we'll be using for this item adapter. And if we see here, we realize that this is an abstract class and it has three methods, and they need to be implemented. So that's why it's throwing the error here. So yeah, like I mentioned, the on create view holder and on bind view holder methods have appeared, and this is what we need to implement. And there's another one that I didn't talk about called get item count, which basically tells you how many items there are that are to be shown in the list. And we can simply just return the data set, which is what it needs. And now we'll focus on the bind view holder method and the create view holder method. Right, so I'll talk a bit about what this is doing here. What it's doing is it's creating a view, and in that view, it's giving the view layout. So the view will be inflated. Inflated basically means it's putting the layout on that view, saying that this view will have this layout. So that's what the layout inflator does. It inflates this particular layout that we created for each item, which is just here you can see the text view there. Yeah, and it's returning that it's taking this view and creating an item view holder with it and returning that. So basically what happens is when the app starts up, the recycler view will ask the adapter to create a view holder, and then this method is called. And when this method is called, it creates a view with this layout and passes this view into the item view holder class we created. And once it does that, it attaches the layout components in that layout we created to whatever view it's been given. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Now we look at the on bind view holder. What it takes is it takes the view holder, which is each item is contained in a view holder. So it takes the particular view holder and it takes the position. Position basically means which item is being displayed now, and it gets it from the list we've given it. So it takes that corresponding affirmation object from the corresponding position, and for that object it sets the corresponding text. So here you see that holder.text is equal to, is getting the string from the from the list of strings we've put in the strings file, and for the corresponding item, it gets the corresponding text. Right, so let's just, this is a final code. What happens here is we're loading the list of affirmations from the data source class that we created, and we're creating a recycle view. And by attaching the recycle view component we used in the layout. And finally, we're setting the adapter for this recycle view. Each recycle view needs to have an adapter. So what we're doing is we're calling the item adapter class, which is what we created here. And we're passing in the context, which tells it all about the layout for this screen and things like that. And we're passing in the data source as well, the list of data that needs to be displayed. And once it does that, it goes through this whole process of first creating the view holder and getting a view with the layout inflated. And from that view, it creates the base container that holds the item. And once it has that base container, it populates the corresponding data for whatever components are in that specific item or element. And this is what the final output should look like. Give me a second. Okay, there seems to be something wrong with my emulator. Excuse me. You can see the same result when you run it, but basically this is what it looks like. At the point we're at right now, it will display just a list of strings we have, affirmations. And in the final code lab, what we'll do is just simply add the images as well. So we'll be looking at the last code lab for today, which is just displaying the list we just saw now, but instead of using images, it uses cards. It display images using the cards that we saw in the final output. So right now our affirmation class only takes in only supports text, so strings. So we'll add support for images as well. So now our affirmation class will be taking in two parameters, the image resource ID and the string resource ID. And they have provided the link to download the images files. So they've been added, and I can access them by calling the subclass of the R class drawable and accessing them in the fashion of r.drawable.image1, image2, and so on and so forth. Now there is one problem here, though string resource ID and image resource ID are both integer values, although sometimes we could mess up the order of passing the arguments, and this could cause problems and throw errors, and the app could possibly crash, and we don't want that. So to avoid this, we can use something called resource annotations, and they're useful because they add additional info and provide this prevent this mixing up of order. Even if you pass them in the wrong order, code will understand and use them in the right order. So yeah, this affirmation is just a basically data class. You could be wondering, you could be asking, why didn't we include this in the place where we use it? We could have, but again, this is just to make things more modular or making things separate from each other so it's easy to maintain and stuff. This is basically just creating a class like how we created the dice class or the coin class in the past sessions. We did it in the program itself where we use the function, but we could do it like this to maintain a bit more organized structure of our code. And accordingly, we'll have to pass in the drawable images as well. So if we go here, we already got an error saying we don't have no value passed to the parameter image resource ID. So let's fix that. And that's how you do it. And to save time, I'll be just copying it from here. But all we're doing here is just we're passing in the extra parameter we added for our affirmations. And now similarly, we have to add support for our image view in the layout that we created as well. Before we didn't use any constraint layout outside or any linear layout outside because there's only one item. But since we'll be including another item and we want the text view to appear below the image, we'll have to use a linear layout to maintain that structure. Otherwise, things would fly everywhere. So yeah, now we have the image view, and then we'll have the title below, the text below it. And similarly, we have to update the item view holder and the onBind view holder to accommodate support for images. And similarly, yeah, so with this, we added support for images as well. And when we run the app, this is what we get. So as you can see, we have right now there'll only be 3 view holders created, and as you scroll through the app, those same 3 will get reused again and again. It doesn't exactly have to be 3. It could be more than 3, less than 3. Basically, it depends on what the recycler view decides, but there'll be at least 3 because right now 3 can fit on my screen, so there'll be at least 3. That could change. They could create 7 also and only use the 7 again and again when you scroll down or scroll back up. So that's again the driving home the efficiency point of the recycler view. And that's pretty much it. All that's left is making polishing the UI. Again, just increasing the distance between the sides and the actual image view, and setting the app theme colors again, like we did last time, setting styles and themes. And lastly, adding the app icon, which we did last time again. We have the foreground layer and the background layer, and we add both like this, on top of each other. And then once it's done, we switch around the folders to make sure nothing is lost, and you'll have it like this. So if I go out here, this is the logo for the Affirmations app. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So all of you, thank you for joining, and thank you if you've continuously joined all 4 sessions, thank you so much for your support. It was really nice teaching you. This is just the track 1, part 1 of our Android Study Jams program. Again, I encourage you to start building, if you haven't already, any app with any idea you might have thought of. There's no limitation on the idea, it's just bringing it to life with the corresponding methods and concepts we learned so far. So you might not have the full skill set to build the whole app, but at least you can get started with the design aspect and the first page and things like that. Or you can even go beyond, learn outside the course as well. That's not a problem. So any upcoming hackathons, I think there are a couple of hackathons up maybe in the first half of this year that will be focusing on Android, and hackathons are really a great way to get to know how much you know and get to know how much you need to learn and showcase your skills. So, and it'll be a lot of fun with having a group of people to do it with you. You'll have a lot of fun as well as gain a lot of experience. And who knows, maybe you'll even gain a good position in the final results. So all this in mind, please do start building an app. I highly encourage you to. Uh, Details about the track 12, we will be sending them out soon, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's all. Thank you so much.